What do you look for in a remote? For such a small piece of equipment, it can have a huge impact on the user experience and the overall enjoyment of your home theater. Over the years, I've used the original Pre-Control 4 Neo remote, a Harmony remote, a Harmony Elite, and now the unfolded Circle Remote 2. And for the last month or so, I've been giving the Sofabaton X1S a test spin here in the theater. How's it compare? Stick around for today's real-world review. One of the biggest complaints you hear about a home theater is how complicated they can be to operate, especially for the people in the house who aren't sitting around watching videos like this every day. The people who didn't set it up and who just want to watch a movie or their favorite TV show. Universal remotes have really come a very long way over the years, going from just putting multiple device remotes into a single case to offering custom activities that can turn on devices, bring up the right input and control the volume, so it's all ready to go in the press of a button. A lot of this progress can be attributed to Logitech's years of development of the Harmony line of remotes. And then they just stopped making them, which has resulted in everyone trying to find the Harmony replacement. And a bunch of newcomers to the scene are trying to fill the space left empty by Logitech. One of those newcomers is Sofabaton. Sofabaton started up about 5 years ago, and they've released a handful of devices of varying degrees of capability, and today I'm going to take a look at their current flagship, the X1S. The X1S comes with a remote, a hub which transmits the commands to your devices, plus enough IR repeaters for 4 devices. The X1S is capable of controlling infrared devices, plus a handful of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices. It has an API that can integrate with other smart home systems, adding an even wider range of device control. The remote is rechargeable via USB-C, and battery life has been great while I've been using it. I charged it to full out of the box and haven't had to plug it in since. I'm going to break this down into a couple of different parts today: the setup and the configuration of the remote, and then the daily use. Having set up a few different remotes, the setup and the daily use can be drastically different experiences, and I want to make sure to discuss them separately. You're going to use it every day, but you only really have to configure it once, unless you're someone who's constantly changing out gear. So each experience should be considered and weighed accordingly. Out of the box, getting the Sofabaton configured with my Wi-Fi network was really pretty simple. Download the app, create an account, select your remote, plug in the hub, connect it with the app via Bluetooth. The app puts it on your Wi-Fi network, and you're ready to start programming. Using a universal remote like the Sofabaton can make life easier, but setup can really be a pain. While I still found the Harmony remotes to be a pain to set up, specifically with projectors, there's no denying that their years in the remote control business resulted in a massive database of product remote codes that made adding devices relatively simple. When I began adding devices to the Sofabaton, I was really excited to see a lot of my hardware already in the database. One thing about having higher-end equipment from smaller brands is that they're not always included in these databases, leaving you just out there to enter everything manually and program it. So I started with my processor, an Anthem AVM60. It's a bit older, but Anthem popped up. I selected the model, and voila, it didn't work at all. Not off to a good start. So I removed it, thought I'd try a different model of Anthem since they often use the same remote codes. At this point, I noticed there were some user-submitted Anthem code sets, so I selected the user-submitted Anthem AVM70 code set, and it worked perfectly. Allowing users to submit their own work for others to use is a fantastic feature. Each device you add requires you to configure the power settings. Basically, do you want this on all the time, only in use, how the power on-off buttons are configured, and you can then custom configure all the physical buttons on the remote for that device, while all commands are still available on the screen. Next up, I added Kaleidoscape. Most of the code set worked, and I don't need to use much of it anyway. The JVC projector remote was perfect. The big test was with my Lumigen. With the unfolded Circle remote, I was able to add the codes, but it is unable to send the older IR format required by Lumagen in a way that's usable. Much to my surprise, the Lumagen codes were in the database and operated the device without issue. Now, I also have a bunch of smart lighting installed in my theater, and it's set up to be controlled and automated by Home Assistant, so I didn't want to confuse anything, and I didn't add these to the Sofabaton. But because they're Hue lights, they should work completely and integrate very nicely with the Sofabaton. One thing important to note, adding Home Assistant to any system, regardless of what remote you're using, can really open up the capability to turn it into a more complete home automation system instead of simply a remote control. Because of the way my Home Assistant installation is configured, I can pick up any one of these remote controls and have the same lighting automation because Home Assistant is listening to the playback status of my Kaleidoscape and my Apple TV, and it sets the lighting according to the devices instead of being built into an activity command from a remote control. I wholly recommend adding Home Assistant to any setup if you have the time. The Sofabaton website indicates it is compatible with Home Assistant, but I haven't yet attempted to see what that configuration will allow. In my setup, it's really relatively unnecessary, but it could prove to be another way to make the Sofabaton remote even more powerful. Activity setup is very much like other similar remotes. Add the required devices to the activity, configure the power-up sequence, including delays, connect the physical buttons to the device commands that you want for that activity. Wrapping up the setup experience, I wanted to add that I really wish that I could configure the Sofabaton with my computer. Being able to program and send commands via an app is a really nice feature, but I'm also tired of everything being tied to my apps and forcing me on my phone. I could program this much faster and easier with a full keyboard, and access to do so would be a feature I'd like to see. Once it's programmed and set up, the remote itself is very snappy. It responds quickly to the commands, and the interaction with the devices feels very much like using their individual factory remotes. Often a universal remote has some lag, or it's slow to wake up, react, or send commands, but not the X1S. It even does a nice job of sending the repeated command when you hold down a button, so big thumbs up on that. Now, I'm sure I could probably get used to it, but I'm not really a fan of the scroll wheel navigation, and I didn't like how the back button was so far away from everything else at the very top of the remote. It's really a stretch, which usually resulted in using my other hand, like two hands for a remote, which was really annoying. I'm sure I could get used to these issues, but there were a couple other items I want to note. Source selection on the Anthem frequently got out of sync, and then I'd have to use the Anthem remote to select a specific source to get the Sofabaton back in sync so I could select the correct device. Because the Anthem remote does not have direct source selection buttons, the Sofabaton learns the order of the inputs, and then it does the equivalent of pressing source and then toggling down and then enter, and so they can get out of sync. But overall, the daily use of this remote is a pretty positive experience. I had some issues here and there, but the experience was predominantly enjoyable. I've heard some complaints about having to plug it in to charge it instead of it just like resting on a dock, but with this kind of battery life, it's really a non-issue. I don't think plugging in a remote once a month is really that much to ask. One other thing I'd like to mention, the plastic housing. This is obviously a user preference of mine, but one of my biggest complaints about the Harmony was the cheap plastic feel. I came to the Harmony from the Neo remote, which was a really nice brushed aluminum, like the new Apple TV remotes, and I replaced it with the unfolded Circle remote 2, which is again a nice brushed aluminum, which really gives it a premium feel. The plastic just feels cheap when compared to these more luxurious remotes. But let's face it, Harmony had decades to build their massive code database and tweak the user experience. Trust me, the Harmony experience was not always as slick as it's been for the last several years. I owned a very early Harmony remote and it was awful. It was terrible to program, it was sluggish, the battery sucked, and nobody else in the house could figure it out. If Sofabaton were to build upon the code base they already have built here, and release a premium version of the hardware with a better case and a touchscreen, and get rid of the scroll wheel, I think they'd really be onto something. And I'd kind of look forward to seeing what they might do in the future. That is all on the Sofabaton X1S. Are you using it? Another great thing about the Sofabaton is you can go buy it. Not all of these other, Harmony replacement remotes are available to just go buy. I've been really pleased with the unfolded circle, but you can't buy it right now. There's nowhere unless you're buying someone's used one. So being able to go buy this, the price is right. The daily use of the Sofabaton is really nice. It's very reactive to your commands. It's just kind of getting used to the ergonomics of it. I haven't really gotten used to the ergonomics yet, but overall, I think it's a promising step in the right direction for universal remote controls. The Home Assistant integration is a big thing. I think they're doing a really nice job with where they are right now, and I think I'm interested to see where they go. All right, thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you again real soon with another Real World Review.